The morning sun peeked through the blinds as Anthony Johnson double-checked the family's passports for the third time. His wife Vanessa was in the bathroom, helping their daughter Lily fix her hair, while their son Noah sat on the edge of the bed, swinging his legs and playing a game on his tablet. "Everyone ready?" Anthony called out, tucking the travel documents into the inner pocket of his blazer. "We need to leave in 15 minutes to beat traffic." "Almost done," Vanessa replied, her voice echoing from the bathroom. Lily wanted her hair and braids for the trip. Anthony smiled, remembering how excited the kids had been when he told them they'd be flying first class to Disney World. As a senior corporate attorney who had recently closed a major deal for his firm, he decided to splurge on this family vacation. They deserved it after the challenging year they'd had, with Vanessa working long hours at the hospital and him often burning the midnight oil on cases. "Dad, will the seats really turn into beds?" Noah asked, looking up from his game. At 7 years old, everything about air travel fascinated him. "They sure do, buddy. And you'll have your own TV screen too." Noah's eyes widened. "Cool. Can I watch movies the whole time?" "We'll see," Anthony chuckled, ruffling his son's hair. "It's a 3-hour flight, so maybe one movie." Vanessa emerged from the bathroom with Lily, whose hair was now styled in neat braids with colorful beads at the ends. At 10 years old, Lily had her mother's grace and her father's analytical mind. "You look beautiful, princess," Anthony said, and Lily beamed. "Thanks, Dad. I want to look nice for our special trip." The family loaded their luggage into their SUV, with Anthony doing one final check of the house before they left. This vacation meant more to him than just a week of fun. Growing up, his own family had never been able to afford trips like this. His parents had worked multiple jobs just to keep food on the table, and luxury travel had been something he only saw in movies. Now, as a successful attorney, he could give his children experiences he'd never had. The drive to the airport was filled with excited chatter. Noah listed all the rides he wanted to try at Disney, while Lily read facts about the resort from a guidebook she'd borrowed from the library. Vanessa caught Anthony's eye in the rearview mirror and smiled. They both knew how much this trip meant to everyone. Parking was surprisingly easy to find, and Anthony pulled into a spot not far from the terminal entrance. As they unloaded their bags, he noticed Vanessa checking her watch. "We're good on time," he assured her. "I gave us an extra hour buffer." "Always the planner," she teased, hooking her arm through his as they walked toward the terminal, rolling their carry-ons behind them, while the kids skipped ahead. The airport buzzed with activity. Families, reuniting, business travelers striding purposefully toward their gates, airport staff directing the flow of people. The Johnsons joined the check-in line for their airline, and Anthony pulled out his phone to bring up their digital boarding passes. "I can't believe we're really going," Lily whispered to her mother. "Dad's been talking about taking us to Disney since I was little." "Your father always keeps his promises," Vanessa replied, giving her daughter's shoulder a squeeze. "He's been saving for this trip for years." When they reached the front of the line, the airline attendant greeted them with a professional smile. "Good morning. Where are you flying to today?" "Orlando," Anthony replied, showing her the boarding passes on his phone. "Johnson family. 4 tickets." The attendant nodded, typing something into her computer. "Yes, I see you here. First class to Orlando, departing at 10:45 a.m. She glanced up at the family with a warm smile. "Have you flown first class with us before?" "It's our first time," Anthony admitted, feeling a small swell of pride. "Special trip for the kids." "Well, you're in for a treat," she said, printing their boarding passes and baggage tags. "The first-class lounge is to your right after security. It has complimentary snacks, drinks, and comfortable seating while you wait for boarding." Noah's eyes lit up at the mention of snacks, and Lily straightened her posture as if already practicing how to behave in the lounge. Security was busier than Anthony had anticipated. They joined the winding line, and he noticed Noah starting to fidget. "How about a game?" Vanessa suggested, sensing her son's growing impatience. "I spy with my little eye." The game kept both kids engaged as they inched forward in the line. When they finally reached the front, Anthony guided his family through the process with practiced efficiency, Laptops out, shoes off, pockets emptied. "Daddy, why do we have to take our shoes off?" Lily asked as she placed her small sneakers in a bin. "It's just to make sure everyone stays safe on the planes," he explained, keeping his answer simple. Once through security, they followed signs to the first-class lounge. As they approached the entrance, Anthony felt a moment of self-consciousness. Even after years of success in his career, there were still times when he felt like an outsider in spaces like this, exclusive areas that had once seemed so far out of reach for someone with his background. The lounge attendant checked their boarding passes and welcomed them with a warm smile. "Welcome to our executive lounge, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. Please make yourselves comfortable. Boarding for your flight will begin in approximately 45 minutes. Inside the lounge was a haven of calm compared to the bustling terminal. Soft music played in the background, and comfortable seating areas were arranged to provide privacy. A buffet of pastries, fruit, and hot breakfast items lined one wall, with a barista station offering specialty coffees. "Wow," Noah whispered, his eyes wide. "This is fancy." Anthony laughed. "Go ahead and get whatever you want, but remember we're having a big lunch when we land." The kids approached the food display with reverence, carefully selecting items for their plates. Vanessa went to get coffees for herself and Anthony, returning with 2 steaming cups and a smile. The barista asked if we wanted any special design. "In the foam," she said, settling beside him on a plush sofa. I think he could tell we're not regular first-class travelers. Anthony took a sip of his coffee. "Well, they better get used to us. I'm planning to do this more often." They spent the next half hour enjoying the lounge amenities. Lily discovered a small library corner and picked out a book to read, while Noah found a gaming station with age-appropriate video games. Anthony used the time to check his work emails one last time before fully disconnecting for the vacation, while Vanessa chatted with another mother who was traveling with her teenage son. At the boarding announcement, Anthony gathered their belongings. "Ready for the next part of our adventure?" The family made their way to the gate where other passengers were already lining up. Anthony noticed the sign for first-class boarding and directed his family toward it, feeling a flutter of excitement. This was it, the moment they'd step onto the plane and begin their special journey together. As they approached the gate, Lily tugged on his sleeve. "Dad, will we really be the first ones on the plane?" "That's right," he confirmed. "One of the perks of flying first class." "And we get the big seats?" Noah added, bouncing on his toes. "The biggest," Vanessa assured him, "with plenty of legroom for Daddy's long legs." The gate area filled with more passengers as the departure time drew nearer. Anthony observed the diverse crowd, business travelers in suits, families with children of various ages, elderly couples leaning on each other. He felt a sense of belonging among them, all journeying to different destinations but sharing this moment in time. A voice came over the intercom. "We will now begin boarding for Flight 382 to Orlando. We invite our first-class passengers to board at this time." Anthony exchanged glances with Vanessa, both of them sharing a silent moment of gratitude for how far they'd come. Then, with Noah and Lily practically vibrating with excitement, they stepped forward, boarding passes in hand, ready to embark on their first-class journey. "After you," Anthony said, gesturing for his family to lead the way. Little did they know that their perfect family vacation was about to take an unexpected turn, one that would test Anthony's composure, challenge Vanessa's patience, and teach their children a difficult but important lesson about the world they lived in. But for now, in this moment, they were simply a family, on the brink of a wonderful adventure, hearts full of hope and anticipation for the magic that awaited them. The Johnson family stood in the first-class boarding line, travel documents in hand. Anthony adjusted his navy blazer and straightened his posture, a habit from his courtroom days. Beside him, Vanessa checked that Lily's backpack was zipped, while Noah bounced on his toes, unable to contain his excitement. "When they call our row, we'll go right in," Anthony explained to the children. "Remember what we talked about. Inside voices on the plane and always buckle your seatbelts." "I know, Dad," Lily said with the slight eye roll of a 10-year-old who felt she was being treated like a baby. The gate agent's voice came over the speaker. "We will now begin boarding our first-class passengers for Flight 382 to Orlando." "That's us," Noah whispered loudly, tugging on Anthony's sleeve. The family approached the gate, joining a short line of well-dressed travelers. A businesswoman with a sleek leather briefcase went through first, followed by an elderly couple who were greeted warmly by the gate agent, a woman with blonde hair pulled into a tight bun. Her name tag read, Patricia. When the Johnsons reached the front of the line, Anthony handed over their boarding passes with a polite smile. "Good morning." Patricia glanced at the passes, then up at the family. Her expression shifted almost imperceptibly as her eyes moved from Anthony in his blazer to Vanessa in her simple sundress, then to the children in their vacation clothes. Something in her gaze made Anthony's stomach tighten, a familiar feeling he'd encountered too many times in his life. "I think there might be some confusion," Patricia said, her voice artificially pleasant. "These are first-class boarding passes," Anthony nodded. "Yes, that's correct." Patricia's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Are you sure you're in the right line? Economy boarding will begin in about 20 minutes. The question hung in the air. Behind them, other passengers shifted uncomfortably. Vanessa's hand found Anthony's, squeezing gently. Their silent signal developed over years of facing these situations together. "We're in the right line," Anthony replied evenly. "We have first-class tickets for today's flight." Patricia tapped at her computer screen. "Let me just double-check something." Her fingers moved across the keyboard, though Anthony noticed she wasn't really typing anything meaningful. "It seems there might have been an error in the system. These seats are quite expensive, you know." Heat crept up Anthony's neck, but his voice remained calm. "I'm aware of the cost. I purchased these tickets myself 3 months ago." By now, Noah had stopped bouncing and was looking back and forth between his father and the gate agent, sensing the tension. Lily moved closer to her mother, her earlier excitement dimming. "Mommy, what's wrong?" she whispered. "Nothing, sweetie," Vanessa assured her, though her grip on Anthony's hand tightened. Patricia looked past them to the line forming behind. "Sir, if you could step aside for a moment so I can assist the other first-class passengers, we can sort this out." "Excuse me," came a voice from behind them. A white man in a business suit stepped forward, extending his boarding pass. "I'm in first class as well." Patricia's demeanor transformed instantly. "Of course, sir. Let me scan that for you right away." She processed his boarding pass with a genuine smile. "Have a wonderful flight." The businessman hesitated, glancing at the Johnson family with a furrowed brow before proceeding through the gate. Anthony felt his professional training kick in, the same calm focus he relied on in tense courtroom situations. "Patricia, I understand you're doing your job, but there's no confusion here. We booked first-class tickets, we paid for first-class tickets, and we're here to board in first class." Patricia's smile thinned. "Sir, it's very unusual for a She caught herself. "For this many people to be booked in first class together. Are you sure there wasn't a misunderstanding when you booked?" "What exactly are you suggesting is unusual about our family?" Vanessa asked quietly, though there was steel beneath her gentle tone. Patricia flushed slightly. "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm simply trying to avoid any confusion before you board." By now, several other passengers were watching the exchange. An older woman behind them in line leaned toward her husband and whispered something that made him frown and shake his head. Anthony reached into his inner jacket pocket and removed his Platinum Airline membership card. "Perhaps this will help clear things up. I'm a Platinum member with your airline and have been for 5 years." Patricia's eyes widened slightly at the sight of the card. "I see. Let me just verify this in our system." As she typed, this time genuinely checking their information, Anthony bent down to Noah's level. "Everything's fine, buddy. Just a mix-up with our tickets." Noah nodded, but his earlier excitement had vanished. "Is it because we're not supposed to be in first class?" he asked in a small voice that broke Anthony's heart. Before Anthony could answer, Patricia spoke again. I'm still seeing an irregularity with these bookings. These seats were part of a promotional upgrade. Economy passengers sometimes get upgraded automatically, but there must have been a system error to upgrade 4 people together. Anthony straightened to his full height. There was no promotional upgrade. I specifically purchased first-class tickets because I wanted my children to have this experience. I can show you the receipt if necessary. He pulled out his phone and opened his email, finding the confirmation that clearly showed the first-class purchase price, a sum that had represented a significant splurge even for his comfortable salary. Other passengers continued to board around them, some casting curious glances, others deliberately looking away from the uncomfortable scene. Anthony noticed a few people whispering, and his chest tightened at the thought of his children witnessing this. Lily tugged on Vanessa's sleeve. Mom, people are staring at us. It's okay, sweetheart, Vanessa soothed, though Anthony could see the tension in her shoulders. Patricia barely glanced at the receipt on Anthony's phone. I understand, sir, but our system is showing something different. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable in economy today, and we can sort this out for future flights. We would not be more comfortable in economy, Anthony stated firmly. We would be more comfortable in the first-class seats that I purchased. A second gate agent, a younger man named Kevin according to his name tag, approached. Is there a problem, Patricia? Patricia lowered her voice, but not enough. The system shows an irregular upgrade for this family. I'm trying to explain that they should board with economy. Kevin glanced at the Johnsons, then at the boarding passes in Patricia's hand. His eyes lingered on Anthony's platinum card still sitting on the counter. Let me take a look. As Kevin reviewed the information, Anthony felt Vanessa's hand on his back, a gentle reminder to keep his cool. He took a deep breath, aware that his children were watching how he handled this situation. Daddy, Noah whispered, did I do something wrong? The innocent question nearly broke Anthony's composure. He knelt down again, looking his son in the eyes. No, buddy, you didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes people make mistakes and we just need to help them fix those mistakes. Behind them, more first-class passengers were being processed without issue. Anthony noticed a family with 2 children, all of them white, sailing through the gate without a second glance from Patricia. Kevin finished reviewing their information and turned to Patricia. These are valid first-class tickets purchased at full price. His voice was professional but firm. The family should board now so we can keep to our schedule. Patricia's lips pressed into a thin line. I still think there's been some kind of mistake. It's very unusual. What's unusual? Anthony interrupted, his patience wearing thin. Is that we're still having this conversation. My family has valid tickets, your colleague has confirmed it, and yet we're still standing here being questioned, while other passengers board without issue. The comment hung in the air. Several nearby passengers shifted uncomfortably, suddenly, finding the floor or their phones fascinating. Kevin cleared his throat. Sir, ma'am, please accept our apologies for the confusion. You're absolutely right. Let me scan your boarding passes right away. As Kevin processed their documents, Patricia stepped back, her expression unreadable. Anthony felt a mix of emotions: relief that they would finally board, anger at the humiliation, and sadness that his children had to witness it all. Have a pleasant flight, Kevin said, handing back their boarding passes with an apologetic smile. Anthony nodded his thanks, guiding his family toward the jet bridge. As they walked away, he heard Patricia say to Kevin, I was just following protocol. You never know when someone might be using stolen credit cards or... Kevin's response was too quiet to hear, but the damage was done. Noah looked up at his father, with confusion in his eyes. Dad, why did she think we stole something? Anthony exchanged a glance with Vanessa, both of them struggling with how to explain this moment to their children. They had hoped to protect them from these experiences for a little longer. She didn't really think that, honey, Vanessa said, though her voice lacked conviction. Sometimes people just make wrong assumptions. As they boarded the plane, the flight attendant at the door welcomed them warmly. Welcome aboard. First class is to your left. The family settled into their spacious seats, but the excitement of flying first class had been tarnished. Lily was unusually quiet as she buckled her seatbelt, and Noah kept looking around as if waiting for someone else to tell them they didn't belong. Anthony helped the children get settled, making sure they had their tablets and headphones ready for the flight. Once they were distracted with their devices, he turned to Vanessa. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I wanted this to be perfect." Vanessa took his hand. "It's not your fault, and it's still going to be a wonderful vacation. I just hate that they had to see that. They're too young to understand." "Are they?" Vanessa asked softly. "Lily's already noticing these things. Maybe it's time we had more of these conversations with them." Anthony nodded, watching as Noah finally began to relax in his seat, the wonder of the large TV screen in front of him slowly rekindling his excitement. Lily had pulled out her journal and was writing something, her brow furrowed in concentration. A flight attendant approached with a tray of orange juice and water. "Welcome aboard. Can I get you folks something to drink before takeoff?" "Orange juice, please," Noah said, his spirits lifting at the special treatment. As the flight attendant served their drinks, Anthony couldn't help but notice how some of her first-class passengers were watching them, some with sympathy, others with curiosity, and a few with what looked like disapproval. The incident at the gate had cast a shadow over the start of their vacation. But as Anthony looked at his family, Vanessa's strength, Lily's thoughtfulness, Noah's resilience, he knew they would turn this into a teaching moment, as they had with other challenges they'd faced. The captain's voice came over the intercom, welcoming everyone aboard and announcing their departure time. As the plane began to push back from the gate, Anthony made a decision. This incident wouldn't be swept under the rug. It wouldn't be dismissed as a simple misunderstanding. Once they reached their hotel, once the kids were happily exploring, he would make a phone call, because no family should have to justify their presence in first class or anywhere else. And Anthony Johnson, with his law degree, his corporate connections, and his determination to create a better world for his children, was in a position to do something about it. But for now, as the plane taxied toward the runway, he focused on salvaging the moment, on helping his family reclaim the joy that had been temporarily stolen from them. "So," he said, raising his orange juice in a toast, "to our first family adventure in first class. May it be the first of many." The children grinned, clinking their plastic cups against their parents. But behind Noah's smile and Lily's brightening eyes, Anthony could see the questions forming. Questions he knew they would need to address sooner rather than later. Questions about why people sometimes looked at their family differently, about why they had to prove they belonged in spaces where others were welcomed without question. Those conversations would come, but they would have them on their own terms, not on Patricia's. The tension at the boarding gate grew thicker by the second. Anthony Johnson stood his ground, boarding passes firmly in hand, while his wife Vanessa had positioned herself slightly in front of their children, a mother's instinctive shield. The confrontation that had begun as a misunderstanding was quickly spiraling into something much worse. "I'm going to need you to step aside while we sort this out," Patricia insisted, her voice carrying just enough for nearby passengers to hear. There are other first-class passengers waiting to board. Anthony felt a familiar tightness in his chest, the same feeling he'd experienced in countless situations throughout his life when his presence was questioned. He'd hoped his children wouldn't have to witness this, at least not on what was supposed to be their dream vacation. "We're not stepping aside," he replied, keeping his voice measured but firm. "Our tickets are valid. Your colleague Kevin has already confirmed that." Kevin, the second gate agent who had verified their tickets, looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Patricia, I checked the system. They purchased these tickets months ago, full fare." Patricia's lips thinned. "I still need to verify with a supervisor. It's protocol when there are irregularities." "What irregularities?" Vanessa asked, her normally gentle voice taking on an edge. "The only irregularity I'm seeing is how you're treating us compared to every other first-class passenger." A small crowd had formed behind them now. Some passengers were checking their watches impatiently, while others watched the scene unfold with undisguised interest. Anthony noticed a few people filming discreetly with their phones. Lily, their 10-year-old daughter, tugged at Vanessa's sleeve. "Mom, why won't she let us on the plane? Did we do something wrong?" The innocence of the question cut through Anthony like a knife. Before Vanessa could answer, he knelt down to his daughter's level, aware that this moment would stay with her. "No, sweetie, we didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes people make assumptions about others based on how they look, not who they are." Lily's brow furrowed. "You mean because we're black?" The directness of her question hung in the air. Anthony had always believed in honest conversations with his children, but he'd hoped to have them on his own terms, not forced by situations like this. "Yes," he said simply. "Sometimes that's part of it." From behind the counter, Patricia's face flushed. "This has nothing to do with... I would never..." She fumbled with her words. "I'm simply following procedure." "Which procedure specifically?" Anthony asked, rising to his full height. "The one that applies only to certain families?" By now, 7-year-old Noah had caught on that something serious was happening. His earlier excitement had vanished, replaced by confusion and the beginnings of hurt. "Daddy, why are people looking at us?" Anthony placed a protective hand on his son's shoulder. "It's okay, buddy. We're just sorting out a misunderstanding." Patricia picked up the phone at her station. "I'm calling for a supervisor." "Good," Anthony replied. "That's exactly what I was about to request." As Patricia made the call, Vanessa discreetly took out her phone and began recording. She'd learned from experience that documentation was often their only defense in these situations. Patricia noticed immediately. "Ma'am, recording is not permitted in the gate area." "Actually," Anthony interjected, "there's no such policy. As an attorney, I'm quite familiar with the airline's terms and conditions. And as Platinum members, we're even more familiar with your boarding procedures." At the mention of his profession, something shifted in Patricia's demeanor. She glanced at the Platinum card still sitting on the counter, then at Anthony's perfectly tailored suit, as if reassessing her initial judgment. Kevin, who had been monitoring the growing line of passengers, stepped forward again. "Patricia, we need to continue boarding. The flight is scheduled to depart in 30 minutes. "I'm waiting for a supervisor," she replied stiffly. During this exchange, Anthony noticed a white family of 4 approaching the gate. They were dressed casually in vacation attire, not unlike his own family. The father handed their boarding passes to Kevin, who processed them without question. As they passed through the gate, the mother gave the Johnsons a sympathetic glance. "Did you see that?" Vanessa whispered to Anthony. "Same family composition, same destination, different treatment." Anthony nodded, his jaw tight. This was exactly why he'd worked so hard, pushed through law school despite the obstacles, built his career in corporate law, to provide his family with privileges that should be rights, to shield them from exactly this kind of treatment. And yet here they were. More passengers were boarding now, flowing around the Johnsons like a river around a stone. Patricia continued to hold their boarding passes hostage while allegedly waiting for a supervisor. Anthony checked his watch, calculating how much longer they could afford to wait before risking missing the flight altogether. Noah, growing increasingly distressed, began to cry quietly. "I don't want to go on the plane anymore," he whispered to Vanessa. "People don't want us there." Vanessa knelt down, cradling his face in her hands. "That's not true, baby. We have every right to be on that plane, in those seats. And we're going. To Disney World, remember? Think about all the fun we're going to have," Noah sniffled, unconvinced. Lily, meanwhile, had taken on the serious expression she wore when processing difficult information. She was old enough to understand what was happening, but young enough that each instance of discrimination still felt like a fresh wound. "Dad," she said, her voice small but determined, "that lady is being unfair. My teacher says we're supposed to speak up when things aren't fair." Anthony felt a surge of pride amid his anger. "That's right, Lily, and that's exactly what we're doing." 10 minutes had passed and still no supervisor had appeared. The boarding area was emptying as most passengers had now boarded the plane. Anthony decided it was time to escalate further. "Patricia," he said, his voice calm but carrying the authority he used in courtrooms. "We've been patient, but this has gone on long enough. Either process our boarding passes now, or I'll need your full name and employee ID for the complaint I'll be filing, along with the recorded evidence of this interaction." Patricia's eyes darted to Vanessa's phone, still recording. "Sir, I'm just following—" "You're not following any legitimate procedure," Anthony interrupted. "You're delaying a family with valid tickets while allowing others to board without question. The longer this continues, the more difficult it will be to explain." A man in a crisp uniform approached the gate. "What seems to be the problem here?" His name tag identified him as William Taylor, customer service manager. Patricia turned to him with visible relief. "Mr. Taylor, I was just about to call you. We have an unusual situation with these passengers claiming to have first-class tickets." "We don't claim to have them," Anthony corrected. "We purchased them, as your systems clearly show." Mr. Taylor looked at the boarding passes Patricia was still holding, then at the computer screen. He frowned. "I see 4 first-class tickets purchased at full fare 3 months ago by Mr. Anthony Johnson." "Yes," Patricia said, "but it seemed irregular for a family of 4 to—" Mr. Taylor held up his hand, cutting her off. "Patricia, may I speak with you for a moment?" He led her a few steps away, but not far enough that the Johnsons couldn't hear their hushed conversation. "What exactly is the issue here?" Mr. Taylor asked. "It just seemed unusual," Patricia insisted. 4 first-class tickets purchased together, and they didn't look like typical first-class passengers. Mr. Taylor's expression hardened. "What does a typical first-class passenger look like, Patricia?" Patricia stammered, realizing her mistake. "I just meant, usual. Ally, it's business travelers, not families with young children. That's not a valid reason to delay their boarding," Mr. Taylor said firmly. "And I'm concerned about the implications of your judgment here." He returned to the Johnsons, his expression professionally apologetic. "Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, I sincerely apologize for this delay. There's absolutely no issue with your tickets. Let me process your boarding right away." As he reached for their boarding passes, Anthony shook his head. "I appreciate that, Mr. Taylor, but this goes beyond a simple delay. My children have been made to feel unwelcome and have heard implications that we don't belong in first class or might have obtained our tickets fraudulently." Mr. Taylor's face fell. "That is completely unacceptable, and I assure you it doesn't reflect our airline's values. Yet it happened," Vanessa pointed out, while dozens of other passengers watched. Lily, who had been absorbing everything, suddenly spoke up. "My dad works really hard. He's a lawyer, and he bought these tickets special for our trip. It's not fair that you think we stole them just because we're black." The blunt truth from a child's mouth seemed to land differently than all the adult protestations. A hush fell over the remaining passengers in the gate area. Mr. Taylor looked genuinely pained. "You're absolutely right, young lady. It isn't fair, and it shouldn't have happened." He turned to Patricia. "Please return to the office. We'll discuss this later." Patricia's face reddened, but she nodded stiffly and walked away. Mr. Taylor personally processed the family's boarding passes. "Again, I offer my deepest apologies. I'd like to speak with you further about this incident, perhaps after your flight or upon your return. Would that be acceptable?" Anthony nodded, though his expression remained serious. "We'll be filing a formal complaint, but yes, I'm willing to discuss it further." As they finally moved toward the jet bridge, Anthony felt a mix of emotions. Relief that they were boarding, pride in how his family had handled the situation, but also a deep sadness that his children had to experience this. The vacation they'd planned for months had already been tainted before it even began. On the plane, the first-class flight attendant greeted them warmly, showing no signs of the prejudice they'd encountered at the gate. "Welcome aboard. Can I get you anything to drink before takeoff?" The children, still subdued from the experience, requested apple juice. Anthony and Vanessa declined drinks, both still processing what had happened. Once settled in their spacious seats, Vanessa leaned over to Anthony. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. He nodded, though they both knew it wasn't entirely true. I just keep thinking about Noah saying people don't want us here. That's going to stay with him. Then we need to make sure other things stay with him too, Vanessa replied, like how we stood our ground, how we didn't let someone else's prejudice stop us from taking our rightful place. Anthony squeezed her hand, grateful for her strength. Then he turned to his children, determined to salvage what he could of their excitement. So, he said, forcing brightness into his voice, who wants to explore all the cool features of these first-class seats? Noah managed a small smile, pressing buttons to discover how his seat reclined. Lily, however, was thoughtful. Dad, she said, is this why you always tell us we have to work twice as hard? The question caught Anthony off guard. He'd used that phrase many times. It was what his own parents had told him, what black parents had been telling their children for generations. But hearing it reflected back from his daughter in this context made him realize how much she was already internalizing. Partly, he admitted. But what happened back there? That wasn't about us not working hard enough. We did everything right. We earned our place here. The problem wasn't with us. Then why did it happen? Lily pressed. Anthony exchanged a glance with Vanessa. This was becoming a much deeper conversation than they'd planned to have at 30,000 feet. Because some people carry wrong ideas in their heads, Vanessa explained. They make judgments based on how people look instead of who they really are. That's stupid, Noah declared with the simple clarity of a 7-year-old. Yes, it is, Anthony agreed. And it's why we always need to stand up for ourselves just like we did today. As the plane began to taxi toward the runway, Anthony made a decision. This incident wouldn't be ignored or minimized. Once the children were asleep tonight in their hotel room, he would make some calls. He had connections in the airline industry, people who needed to know what had happened. Because while he couldn't shield his children from every instance of prejudice they would face, he could show them what it meant to use your voice and your position to create change. That would be the real lesson from today. Not that discrimination still existed, but that they had the power and the right to fight back against it. The plane accelerated down the runway, lifting into the sky. As Orlando grew closer, Anthony watched his children slowly regain their excitement about the trip ahead. Their resilience amazed him, as it always did. But he knew that beneath that resilience were questions and hurts that shouldn't have to be part of childhood. Tonight, after the magic of their first day at Disney, he would make that phone call, and he would make sure that what happened to his family today wouldn't happen so easily to another family tomorrow. The first day at Disney World had been everything Anthony had hoped it would be for his family. Despite the troubling start at the airport, Vanessa had worked her magic, helping the children focus on the excitement ahead rather than the humiliation behind. They'd spent hours exploring the Magic Kingdom, riding attractions, meeting characters, and soaking in the wonder that only Disney could create. Now, as the evening settled over their hotel suite, Anthony stood on the balcony, watching the distant fireworks illuminate the sky. Behind him, inside the room, Noah had finally succumbed to exhaustion, sprawled across one of the queen beds, still wearing his Mickey Mouse ears. Lily sat cross-legged on the other bed, organizing the trading pins she'd collected throughout the day while Vanessa showered away the Florida heat. The peacefulness of the scene made what had happened at the airport seem almost like a bad dream. Almost. Anthony's jaw tightened as he recalled Noah's tears, Lily's confusion, and Vanessa's quiet fury masked by dignity. The memories had simmered beneath the surface all day, occasionally surfacing when he caught glimpses of other families. Families who didn't have to worry about being questioned when they occupied spaces they had every right to be in. He pulled his phone from his pocket, checking the time. Just past 9:30 p.m. Not too late to make the call he'd been thinking about all day. Vanessa emerged from the bathroom in her robe, hair wrapped in a towel. She took one look at Anthony's expression and crossed to the balcony door. "You're going to call him, aren't you?" she asked softly, careful not to wake Noah. Anthony nodded. "I need to. What happened today? It can't just be another story we tell, another lesson our kids learn about how the world sees them." Vanessa touched his arm gently. "I know. Just remember why we're here," She gestured toward the children. Whatever you do, don't let it overshadow this time with them. I won't, he promised. This call is part of making sure their future holds fewer days like today. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. I'll get them settled for the night. Take your time. Anthony waited until Vanessa had guided a sleepy Lily into her pajamas and tucked both children into their beds before stepping fully onto the balcony and closing the door behind him. The night air was warm and heavy with humidity, carrying the distant sounds of the resort, faint music, the occasional burst of laughter, the gentle splash of the pool below. He scrolled through his contacts until he found the name he was looking for. Thomas Reynolds. They'd attended law school together, forged a friendship through late-night study sessions and mutual respect, and had remained connected as their careers diverged. Anthony into corporate law, Thomas into the executive ranks of one of the country's largest airlines, the same airline they'd flown today. Anthony's finger hovered over the call button. He wasn't one to leverage personal connections for special treatment. In fact, he'd built his reputation on hard work and meticulous preparation, not on who he knew. But this wasn't about special treatment. This was about accountability. He pressed call. The phone rang 3 times before Thomas answered, his voice warm with recognition. Anthony Johnson, to what do I owe the pleasure on a Sunday evening? Thomas, Anthony replied. Sorry to call outside of business hours. How are you? Can't complain. Neck deep in quarterly reports, but that's life in the C-suite. How about you? Aren't you supposed to be on vacation this week? I am, Anthony confirmed. We're in Orlando, day 1 at Disney with the kids. Ah, the obligatory parental pilgrimage, Thomas chuckled. How are Vanessa and the children? Anthony looked through the glass door at his family. Vanessa now reading a bedtime story to Lily while Noah slept peacefully. They're good. Tired from all the excitement. So what prompts a call during sacred family vacation time? Thomas asked, a note of curiosity in his voice. Not that I'm not happy to hear from you, but I know how seriously you take family time. Anthony took a deep breath. Something happened today, Thomas. Something I think you need to know about as an executive at your airline. The lightness in Thomas's voice disappeared immediately. Go on. Anthony recounted the incident at the Y. Gate in detail, Patricia's immediate skepticism, the questioning of their first-class tickets, the implication of fraud, the humiliation in front of other passengers, and worst of all, the impact on Noah and Lily. She made my 7-year-old son cry, Thomas. Made him feel like he didn't belong in a seat I paid good money for. Made my daughter question whether we were doing something wrong by being there. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Thomas finally spoke, his voice was tight with controlled anger. There's no excuse for this, Anthony. None whatsoever. No, there isn't, Anthony agreed. And I want to be clear. I'm not calling as a friend looking for special treatment. I'm calling as a father, a customer, and an attorney who knows this isn't an isolated incident. I understand, Thomas replied. And I appreciate you bringing this directly to me. Do you have the gate agent's name? Patricia Winters. There was a second agent named Kevin, who actually verified our tickets, and eventually a customer service manager, William Taylor, who intervened. Anthony could hear Thomas typing. I'm making notes. What flight number and time? Anthony provided the details, then added, Vanessa recorded part of the interaction on her phone. We were planning to file a formal complaint through the regular channels, but I thought you should know first, given your position. I'm glad you called me, Thomas said firmly. This goes against everything we claim to stand for as a company. Where are you staying? I'd like to send someone to get a formal statement and copy of the recording. We're at the Grand Floridian, Anthony replied. But Thomas, we're here for the kids. I don't want the situation to intrude any further on our vacation. I understand. Completely. What if I send someone to meet you briefly tomorrow morning before you head to the parks? 30 minutes tops, then you can get back to making magical memories while I raise hell at headquarters. Anthony considered this. That would work. Early, though. We promised the kids rope drop at Epcot. First thing, Thomas assured him. And Anthony, I'm truly sorry this happened to your family. It's unacceptable on every level. After finalizing the details for the meeting the next morning, Anthony ended the call and stood for a moment, watching the final bursts of fireworks fade from the sky. He felt a complicated mix of emotions, relief at having taken action, lingering anger at what had happened, but also a strange gratitude for his position. Unlike many families who faced similar discrimination, he had direct access to someone with the power to create real consequences. He slid open the balcony door and stepped back into the room. Vanessa looked up from the bed where she was now sitting between their sleeping children. How did it go? She whispered. Anthony sat on the edge of the bed. Better than expected. Thomas is sending someone to meet us tomorrow morning to get a formal statement and copy of your recording. Vanessa nodded. Good. That gate agent needs to understand the impact of her actions. It's not just about her, Anthony said thoughtfully. It's about the culture that made her comfortable questioning us in the first place. Thomas seemed genuinely upset, not just professionally, but personally. As he should be, Vanessa replied. She gently stroked Noah's hair as he slept. I keep thinking about what he said, that people didn't want us there. 7 years old, and he's already internalizing these messages. Anthony's throat tightened. I know. That's why I had to make the call. Not just for us, but for every family that comes after us who might not have a direct line to an airline executive. Vanessa reached for his hand. You did the right thing. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching their children sleep. Finally, Anthony spoke. We should get some rest. Tomorrow's another big day. You go ahead, Vanessa said. I think I'll stay here a bit longer. Anthony understood. After days like today, it was natural to want to keep your children close, to protect them even in their dreams from the harsh realities waiting in the world. He leaned over to kiss her, then each of his children, before preparing for bed himself. As he brushed his teeth, he found himself wondering what would come of his call to Thomas. Would there be real consequences? Or would it be handled with the typical corporate response, a formal apology, perhaps a voucher for future travel, and vague promises about additional training? The next morning arrived too quickly. Anthony was already awake and dressed when a text came through from Thomas at 6:15 a.m. My assistant Jennifer will meet you in the hotel lobby at 7:00. She has authorization to handle this at the highest level. Thank you for trusting me with this. Anthony showed the message to Vanessa as she helped the children get ready for another day of adventure. What does highest level mean? She asked, helping Lily with her sunscreen. I'm not sure, Anthony admitted. But knowing Thomas, it means this isn't being swept under the rug. At 6:55, they headed down to the lobby, having promised the children a special breakfast after Daddy's quick meeting. The Grand Floridian was already buzzing with families eager to start their day at the parks. A professionally dressed woman approached them, her expression warm but businesslike. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, I'm Jennifer Adams, Mr. Reynolds' executive assistant. Thank you for making time this morning. She led them to a quiet corner of the lobby where they could speak privately. Noah and Lily sat nearby with their tablets, headphones, on, thoroughly distracted by their games. Mr. Reynolds has asked me to express his personal apologies for what occurred yesterday, Jennifer began, opening her portfolio. He's taken immediate action based on your call. She explained that Patricia Winters had been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. The customer service manager, William Taylor, was being interviewed about his handling of the situation and the delay in his response. We'd like to get your formal statement and a copy of the recording Mrs. Johnson made, Jennifer continued. But first, I want to assure you that Mr. Reynolds is treating this as a systemic issue, not an isolated incident. Anthony and Vanessa exchanged glances. This was more than they had expected. What does that mean exactly? Vanessa asked. It means that beyond addressing this specific incident, Mr. Reynolds has called an emergency meeting of the executive leadership team for this morning. He's demanding a full review of our customer service protocols, implicit bias in our boarding procedures and employee training. Jennifer handed them each a business card with Thomas's direct contact information. Mr. Reynolds would like to speak with you personally when you return from your vacation. He feels that your experience highlights issues that require immediate attention at the highest levels of the company. As Jennifer continued outlining the steps being taken, Anthony noticed something unusual happening in the lobby. Hotel staff were suddenly moving with purpose, and several official-looking individuals in suits had appeared near the entrance. Jennifer followed his gaze and smiled slightly. There's one more thing. Mr. Reynolds is actually here in Orlando for a conference. When he received your call last night, he rearranged his schedule to address this personally. Anthony's eyebrows rose in surprise. Thomas is here? As if on cue, Thomas Reynolds himself walked into the lobby, accompanied by what appeared to be several other airline executives. Spotting Anthony, he approached with long strides, his expression a mix of professional determination and personal concern. Anthony, Vanessa, he said, shaking their hands warmly. I apologize for intruding on your family time, but after hearing what happened, I couldn't in good conscience handle this from a distance. The lobby had grown curiously quiet. Other guests were watching the scene unfold, sensing something significant was happening. Hotel staff stood at attention, clearly recognizing the VIP presence in their midst. Thomas lowered his voice. What happened to your family yesterday is completely unacceptable. Not just as a company policy violation, but as a fundamental failure of human decency. He explained that he had personally reviewed the security footage from the gate area and had already had conversations with both Patricia Winters and William Taylor. I won't bore you with corporate speak about diversity initiatives and sensitivity training, Thomas said frankly. The reality is that Patricia Winters has a pattern of similar behavior that somehow went unaddressed. That stops today. Anthony felt a weight lifting from his shoulders, the burden of wondering whether his call would make any difference. Thank you for taking this seriously, Thomas. It's the very least I can do, Thomas replied. Then, noticing Noah and Lily, watching curiously from their seats, he added, and please tell your children that they are always welcome in first class or any other part of our airline. In fact, he reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew 2 small packages. With your permission, I'd like to give them these. They're our junior pilot wings, normally reserved for children touring our flight deck. But I think an exception is warranted here. Vanessa called the children over and Thomas knelt to their level as he presented the wings, speaking to them with the same respect he'd shown their parents. Noah's face lit up as he pinned the wings to his shirt, his earlier tears forgotten in the excitement of this special recognition. As Thomas stood to leave, he made one final comment to Anthony and Vanessa. I've already initiated a company-wide review of our boarding procedures and customer service protocols. What happened to your family highlights gaps in our system that need to be addressed immediately. I'd like to continue this conversation when you return home, if you're willing. Your perspective would be invaluable as we work to make substantive changes. The entire exchange had taken less than 20 minutes, but its impact was palpable. As Thomas and his entourage departed, the lobby returned to its normal activity, though many guests were now looking at the Johnson family with curious respect, wondering who they were to command such attention from airline executives. Noah tugged at Anthony's sleeve. Dad, who was that man? Why did he give us these cool pins? Anthony knelt beside his son. That was Mr. Reynolds. He's in charge of the airline we flew yesterday, and he wanted to make sure you know how special and welcome you are. Because of what happened with the mean lady at the airport? Lily asked perceptively. Yes, Vanessa confirmed. He wanted to make it right. Noah considered this, turning the pilot wings on his shirt. So he's like a superhero who fixes things when people are unfair? Anthony smiled. Something like that, buddy. But you know what? We helped make that happen. By standing up for ourselves, by not accepting unfair treatment, we helped Mr. Reynolds see something that needed to be fixed. As they headed to breakfast, Anthony felt a renewed sense of purpose. The incident at the airport would always be a painful memory, but now it was also something else. A catalyst for change, a teachable moment for his children about the power of speaking up, and a reminder that sometimes one phone call really could make a difference. What had begun as a humiliating experience was transforming into something powerful. A story not just about discrimination, but about accountability, about using one's position and voice to create ripples of change that might benefit countless families they would never meet. And as they stepped into the bright Florida sunshine, ready to embrace another day of vacation magic, Anthony knew that this, the lesson that they had the power to create change, might be the most valuable souvenir his children would take home from this trip. 2 weeks had passed since the Johnson family returned from their Disney vacation. While the children had largely moved on, captivated by the return-to-school routines and the excitement of sharing their adventure stories with friends, Anthony couldn't quite let go of what had happened at the airport. The memory remained fresh. Noah's tears, Lily's confusion, Vanessa's quiet dignity in the face of humiliation. It was Tuesday afternoon when Anthony's phone rang in the middle of a client meeting. Seeing Thomas Reynolds' name on the screen, he excused himself and stepped into the hallway of his law firm's downtown office. "Thomas," he greeted. "Good to hear from you." "Anthony," Thomas replied, his voice carrying the weight of purpose. "I promise to update you personally on the actions we've taken following your family's experience. Do you have a few minutes?" Anthony glanced at his watch. "I can spare 10 before I need to get back to a meeting." "I'll be brief then," Thomas assured him. "First, I want you to know that Patricia Winters has been terminated." Anthony took a deep breath. While he hadn't specifically asked for the gate agent to lose her job, he couldn't deny feeling a sense of justice. "I see." "It wasn't just about your incident," Thomas continued, as if reading Anthony's thoughts. "When we reviewed her record, we found a pattern of similar complaints that had been inadequately addressed by her supervisors. 3 other families had reported experiences like yours in the past year alone." "All black families?" Anthony asked, though he already knew the answer. "Yes," Thomas confirmed. "And that leads me to the more significant changes we're implementing. The incident with your family exposed a troubling blind spot in our oversight systems. Complaints about racial bias were being categorized as customer service issues rather than potential discrimination, which meant they weren't being properly escalated or tracked." Anthony leaned against the wall, processing this information. What had happened to his family wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a pattern, one that might have continued unaddressed if he hadn't had a direct line to an airline executive. "We've completely revamped our complaint categorization system," Thomas continued. "More importantly, we've established an independent review board specifically focused on potential discrimination issues. And I'd like to ask a favor, Anthony. I'd like you to consider serving on this board." The request caught Anthony by surprise. "Me? Thomas, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not in the airline industry. I'm a corporate attorney." "Exactly," Thomas replied. "We need outside perspectives, particularly from professionals who understand both the legal implications and the human impact of these situations. Your experience as both a legal expert and as someone who's personally faced this kind of treatment makes your perspective invaluable." Anthony considered the offer. His schedule was already packed with client meetings, court appearances, and the precious evening hours he reserved for family time. Taking on another commitment would mean sacrifices somewhere, yet he couldn't shake the image of Noah's face when the gate agent had questioned their tickets, the confusion, the hurt, the early seeds of understanding that some people would always see him differently because of his skin color. "Let me discuss it with Vanessa," Anthony said finally. "When would the board meet?" "Once a quarter in person with monthly video conferences as needed," Thomas explained. "I understand it's a significant commitment, but I believe your participation could help ensure that what happened to your family doesn't happen to others." After promising to consider the offer, Anthony returned to his meeting, though his mind kept drifting to Thomas's proposal. That evening, after the children were in bed, he broached the subject with Vanessa as they sat on the couch with glasses of wine, unwinding from their busy day. "Thomas called," he began, swirling the red liquid in his glass. Patricia Winters has been fired. Vanessa nodded slowly. I can't say I'm surprised, or particularly sorry. There's more, Anthony continued. He's establishing a review board specifically for discrimination complaints, and he's asked me to serve on it. Vanessa set her glass down, studying her husband's face. What are you thinking? I'm thinking about Noah asking why people didn't want us there, Anthony replied softly. About Lily understanding too soon that some people will judge her based on her skin. About how many other families face the same thing without having a direct line to someone in power. So you want to do it, Vanessa concluded. I think I need to, Anthony admitted. But it would mean more time away from you and the kids. Vanessa reached for his hand. The children are watching everything we do, Anthony. They saw us stand up for ourselves at that gate. Now they can see us working to change the system that allowed it to happen. The next morning, Anthony called Thomas and accepted the position on the review board. What he didn't expect was the media attention that would follow. The story broke 3 days later, when the airline issued a press release announcing the formation of the Independent Passenger Equity Review Board. The release mentioned Anthony's appointment, briefly referencing a recent incident involving discriminatory treatment that had prompted the airline's self-examination. By that afternoon, Anthony's office phone was ringing constantly with requests for interviews. A journalist had somehow connected the dots to the Johnson family's experience, and social media was buzzing with fragmented versions of what had happened. Your 7 o'clock is here, Anthony's assistant announced, poking her head into his office where he sat staring at the growing list of media requests. His client, the CEO of a mid-sized tech company, entered with a curious expression. You're suddenly famous counselor. My wife just texted me a link to an article about you standing up to some airline. Is that why you had to reschedule our meeting twice last week? Anthony smiled wryly. Partly. It's been an unexpected journey. After their meeting, Anthony returned to find more messages, including one from a producer at a national morning news program, requesting an interview with him and his family to discuss their experience and the changes it had sparked. He called Vanessa at the hospital where she worked as a pediatric nurse. The media's caught wind of the story, he explained. They want to interview all of us. Vanessa was quiet for a moment. What do you think? I think we need to be careful about exposing the kids to more attention, Anthony replied. But I also think there's value in sharing what happened, in letting other families know they're not alone and that speaking up can lead to change. Let me talk to them after school, Vanessa suggested. See how they feel about it. That evening, the family gathered around the dinner table, and Vanessa gently explained the situation. Remember what happened at the airport before our Disney trip? She asked. Well, because Daddy spoke up about it, the airline is making big changes to make sure it doesn't happen to other families. And now some people want to talk to us on TV about our experience. Noah's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Like, we'd be on actual TV? Would my friends see it? They might, Anthony confirmed. Lily, always the more contemplative of the two, considered this carefully. Would it help other kids not feel bad like we did? Anthony felt a surge of pride at his daughter's immediate concern for others. It might, yes. It could help other families know they're not alone, and that they should speak up when they're treated unfairly. Then I think we should do it, Lily decided. Noah nodded in agreement, though Anthony suspected he was more excited about the prospect of being on television than about the social impact. The following week found the Johnson family in a television studio, waiting to be interviewed live on National Morning. Anthony had established clear boundaries with the producers. No sensationalism, no exploitation of the children's emotions, and a focus on the positive changes that had resulted from their experience, rather than dwelling solely on the negative incident. As the makeup artist finished with Vanessa, a production assistant approached. 5 minutes until you're on, the segment after the commercial break. Anthony knelt in front of his children, straightening Noah's tie and adjusting Lily's headband. Remember what we talked about. Just be yourselves and tell the truth about how you felt. You don't have to answer any questions that make you uncomfortable. I know, Dad, Lily said with the slight eye roll of a preteen who felt she was being babied. We're going to help other kids by telling our story. The floor director guided them to their positions on the set, where the two hosts, a man and woman in coordinating outfits, greeted them warmly. After a brief exchange of pleasantries, the director began the countdown, and suddenly they were live. Welcome back, the female host began. We're joined now by the Johnson family, whose recent experience at a major airline's boarding gate has sparked significant changes in how the company handles discrimination complaints. Anthony Johnson, a corporate attorney, his wife Vanessa, a pediatric nurse, and their children Lily and Noah are here to share their story. The male host turned to Anthony. Mr. Johnson, can you tell us what happened that day at the airport? Anthony recounted the incident clearly but calmly, describing how their valid first-class tickets had been repeatedly questioned, how other passengers had boarded without similar scrutiny, and how his children had been forced to witness their parents being humiliated. What stood out to me, he concluded, wasn't just the treatment we received, but the fact that this gate agent felt comfortable questioning our presence in first class in front of dozens of witnesses. That speaks to a culture where such behavior is, if not encouraged, at least tolerated. The female host turned to Vanessa. Mrs. Johnson, as a mother, how did it feel to see your children experience this kind of discrimination, perhaps for the first time? Vanessa's expression was composed, but her eyes reflected the pain of the memory. It broke my heart. Every parent wants to protect their children from hurt, but particularly from the kind of hurt that comes from being judged for who you are, rather than what you've done. Our children were so excited about this trip, about flying first class for the first time, and to see that excitement dimmed by someone else's prejudice was devastating. And Lily, the host continued gently, you're 10, right? How did you feel when this was happening? Lily sat up straighter, her voice clear despite her nervousness. At first I was confused. I didn't understand why the lady was being so mean when we hadn't done anything wrong. Then I realized it was because of how we look, and that made me sad and mad at the same time. Mad because it wasn't fair? The host prompted. Yeah, Lily nodded. My teacher always says we should treat everyone the same way, with respect, but that lady didn't show us respect even though my dad was being super polite. The male host turned to Noah, keeping his question simple for the 7-year-old. And Noah, how do you feel about what happened now? Noah thought for a moment, his legs swinging beneath his chair. I was scared when it happened, but then Dad made a phone call and this important man came to our hotel and gave us special pilot wings. He pointed proudly to the pin he had insisted on wearing for the interview. Dad says sometimes when bad things happen, we can help make them better by speaking up. The focus shifted back to Anthony, as the hosts asked about the changes the airline had implemented following the incident. Anthony explained the new review board, his role on it, and the broader examination of customer service protocols the airline was undertaking. The most significant change, he emphasized, is the acknowledgement that these aren't isolated incidents but part of a pattern that requires systematic addressing. By categorizing these complaints properly and having them reviewed by an independent board that includes outside perspectives, the airline is taking a meaningful step toward real change. As the interview concluded, the female host asked one final question. What message would you like other families to take from your experience? Anthony and Vanessa exchanged glances, having anticipated this question. Vanessa spoke first. We want families to know they're not alone in these experiences, and that they have every right to speak up when they're treated unfairly. And, Anthony added, we want organizations to understand that addressing discrimination isn't just about handling individual incidents, but about examining the systems that allow those incidents to occur. Real change requires both accountability for specific actions and a commitment to transforming the culture that enables them. After the cameras stopped rolling, the hosts thanked them warmly. That was powerful, the male host said. I think a lot of families will find strength in your story. In the days that followed, the interview went viral. Clips were shared across social media platforms, and other news outlets picked up the story. Anthony's inbox filled with messages from families sharing similar experiences, thanking the Johnsons for speaking out. Several other airlines reached out, requesting his input on their own customer service protocols. A civil rights organization invited him to speak at their annual conference. Publishers suggested he write a book about navigating corporate America as a person of color. The attention was overwhelming, but Anthony maintained his focus on what mattered most: his family and the specific changes he could help implement through the review board. 6 months later, the Johnsons were preparing for another family vacation. As they approached the airport, Noah asked, "Dad, will that mean Lady be at the gate again?" "No, buddy," Anthony assured him. "She's not working there anymore, and a lot of things have changed since our last trip." Indeed, as they checked in for their flight, Anthony noticed new signage throughout the terminal, highlighting the airline's commitment to equitable treatment. The staff wore pins reading "Respect Every Journey," part of a new campaign launched in the wake of the review board's first round of recommendations. At the gate, they were greeted by a different agent who processed their first-class boarding passes without a second glance. As they settled into their seats, Lily nudged her father. "Dad, look," she whispered, pointing to a card in the seatback pocket. It outlined the airline's new passenger Bill of Rights, which included explicit protections against discrimination and clear instructions for reporting concerns. Anthony smiled, seeing the tangible evidence of change. Change that had begun with one family's refusal to accept mistreatment, one phone call that had made an entire airport go silent, and one determination to transform a painful experience into a catalyst for progress. As the plane taxied toward the runway, he thought about all the families who would board this airline in the future. Families who might never know the role the Johnsons had played in ensuring they were treated with dignity and respect from check-in to landing. And that, he realized, was perhaps the most meaningful resolution of all, not just the accountability for what had happened to them, but the prevention of similar experiences for countless others whose names they would never know, whose journeys would be marked by the respect that every traveler deserved.